Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, December 29th, 2020, and in just 7 days, we will find out who will control the United States Senate. Why is this happening? Well, there are two runoff elections in the state of Georgia, and today we're going to be analyzing the early vote and talking about why currently it benefits the Democratic Party. Now, there is always the chance that the early vote does in fact change. There are still 3 days left remaining in order for citizens to vote early. It closes on the 1st of January. And then on the 5th of January, the actual election will occur. Traditionally, the early vote does not overshadow the regular election day vote, but given that we are in a global pandemic, it's expected widely to do so. Right now, 2.3 million people have voted in the 2021 Georgia runoff elections early. At this point, in reference to 2020, 3 million citizens had voted in the Georgia presidential election. So a decrease of around 700,000 votes, but this is on track to be the highest turnout ever for a runoff election with two Senate races, so both will break records in United States history. So looking at Georgia, based off its raw vote share, the Democratic Party has some parts that they can look forward to, but also they should still be apprehensive given that the election day vote in Georgia in 2020 broke for President Trump 60-38. So let's talk about runoff turnout just very briefly. This election is on track to be one of the highest levels of turnout that we saw compared to every previous runoff election. Raw vote share, it has already surpassed the 2008 Senate race between, Sachse Chambliss and Jim Martin. And this was a Senate race that was extremely competitive on the presidential election day. Obama had a wave election. At this point in time, the Democratic Party had 58 seats in the United States Senate, with one contentious Senate race in the state of Minnesota, which had to go through numerous recounts, and then, of course, this runoff election. But traditionally, the Democratic Party does not perform too well after, runoffs actually occur. The reason for that is because the Democratic Party traditionally benefits from higher turnout, and the most turnout is always going to be on the election day. Also, in 2008, the Democratic Party already had 59 seats once Al Franken was confirmed, but 58 seats in the United States Senate. I can't imagine anyone would see the dire urgency of having just one more United States senator when the Democratic Party had way more senators than the Republican Party. Way more senators. And if you're looking at the House of Representatives, the same exact thing. 2008 was a blowout year in favor of the Democratic Party and Barack Obama. So I see why nobody wanted to turn out overwhelmingly in the Georgia Senate runoff election. On top of that, some very notable endorsements occurred right after the 2008 presidential election. Obama didn't even visit this state to help Jim Martin. It seems as if he knew that he was going to lose this Senate race. But looking at this Senate race, Obama may not be president, but he sure is going all out for Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, because these two Senate races will determine Senate control. In 2008, it didn't matter. Really, it did not matter. It did because the Democratic Party wanted a filibuster-proof majority, but they still got that for a very short period of time. This is when it truly matters. This will single-handedly determine Senate control. 48 seats for the Democrats, 50 seats for the Republicans. If the Democrats win both seats, they have the majority for 2 years. We'll see what happens in 2022. But looking at the turnout now, it has already surpassed every runoff election in Georgia. And looking at the runoff turnout based off the November turnout, it's at 47%, 32% of eligible voters. So once we see the election day turnout, I have no doubt in my mind that the share of eligible voters will be much higher than 2008 or even 2018, 1992, 2006, 1998. But also point one thing out. The last time the Democratic Party did better in a runoff election was 1998 in the Public Service Commission runoff election. That was the only time the Democratic Party did better in a runoff. Why? Because turnout always decreases. Turnout always decreases in the runoff elections. So looking at the turnout so far, by congressional district, we have seen very Democratic districts vote at higher rates than Republican districts. But that makes sense. So don't look too deep into the congressional district voting blocks, but if there isn't an overwhelming same-day turnout, well, then that's when the Republican Party should start worrying. But right now, the two lowest districts are Georgia 14 and Georgia 11. These are districts that have voted by roughly 52% of their 2020 early vote turnout. Well, what does that actually mean? That just tells us that these people aren't voting at high rates as Democratic districts. Looking at Georgia's 14th district, only 22% of party-specific voters went with the Democratic Party in the regular election. In Georgia's 11th district, 45.7% went for the Democratic Party, but still, it's a Republican district. The top two, Georgia's 4th and Georgia's 5th, are even more lopsided than the first district I just showed you. In Georgia's 4th district, 84.3% people chose a Democratic ballot. In Georgia's 5th district, 93.7% chose a Democratic ballot. So more lopsided and higher turnout amongst the Democratic Party should tell us that they will be leading based off the early vote. We know that they will be leading, but we don't know who is going to be voting on Election Day. We don't know that turnout yet. So it makes sense that some of these Republican districts are down because a lot of these more right-wing candidates are encouraging, and right-wing surrogates are encouraging Republicans and conservative-leaning independents to vote on Election Day. The idea of vote by mail being fraudulent started with the Republican Party. That started with President Trump, at least for this election. That's always been in discussion, but it's never actually been proven. You know, looking at the amount of voter fraud relative to the amount of votes, we're talking a tens place out of 40 million people voting in the presidential election. And most of the time, when you talk about mail-in ballot fraud, what would be classified as fraud is really just people making mistakes, using the wrong color pen, their signatures not matching. And then when they call the voter and ask, did you vote? And they say yes, that's not fraud. That's just them messing up their signature. Maybe they got a new signature from their license that they used back when they were 20 and they're 60 now. Obviously, things change. And when you're looking at what even the Trump campaign brought to the courts as fraud was just mistakes on behalf of the voters. Because whenever they were under oath, they had always said consistently there was no fraud. All of what they're doing is just trying to ask the judges to throw out ballots in traditionally Democratic areas due to inaccuracies or due to incorrect filling out of a ballot. And when we have this thing called curing ballots in Georgia specifically, where if voters make a mistake, they still have a time period where they could be contacted and told, you know, your ballot has a mistake. You need to come in and fix it if you want your vote to actually be counted. I think that's actually democracy in action. That is allowing everyone's vote to count. Just because they made one mistake on the ballot should not completely invalidate their ballot if it was an honest mistake. But also, if we're looking at Georgia's 14th and Georgia 11th district, the bottom two are very Republican districts, or at least more so than Georgia's 4th and Georgia's 5th by a long shot. And I think we shouldn't read too deep into the fact that these districts aren't turning out as high rates as Democratic districts, but it should be a warning sign if the Republican Party does not see a huge influx of same-day voters on January 5th. I can guarantee it, there are plenty of Republicans who refuse to vote by mail, plenty of conservatives in Georgia that will be voting on Election Day. But the question is, how many? So let's go ahead and take a look at the Georgia early voting statistics in this runoff election. 2.3 million voters, 2,337,477 as of today, December 29th, 2020. That's hit 30.2% of registered voters. Now, it mismatches what 538 says with 32%, but they're around the same measure, and it doesn't really matter. The number is the exact same. In 2020, there were 4 million votes. 57.3% of registered voters turned out early to vote. But looking at this election, they're off that by 17%. But it makes sense. We're in the middle of a holiday season. Christmas just passed. We're entering into a new year, and plenty of people are done with politics. But we can actually look a little bit deeper into some of these demographic points that I think are important to note. Let's compare 2020 versus 2021. Based off of total voted by race and ethnicity, non-Hispanic black voters only made up 28% of the early vote, rounding upwards. This election, they make up 31.5% or 32% voting, rounding upwards. Non-Hispanic white voters in 2020 for the presidential election accounted for 56.5% of the early vote. This election, only 55.2%. But the Democratic Party should worry a little bit about Hispanic and non-Hispanic Asian American voters just going down a little bit. Non-Hispanic Native American voters are around the same. And then others/multiple/unknown is down from 10 points to 8.5%. But still, the fact that black voters, which are the most reliable base for the Democratic Party, they are the reason why Joe Biden won the election. Maybe not solely because of them, but Joe Biden, absolutely, won on the backs of minority voters, specifically black voters across this country, black organizers. Stacey Abrams was a huge impact in the state of Georgia. She took what would have been probably close to a decade and turned it into 2 years. And looking at these runoff elections, based off the preliminary election data, I am going to conclude that the numbers right now benefit the Democratic Party. But there are still 3 days to go. But based off the numbers now, the race is looking better for the Democrats than it looked for Joe Biden. But I'm not here to give you hope. Draw your own conclusions about a certain Georgia race, because I've seen many comments in my channel talking about how the early voting statistics do favor the Democratic Party. And I've also seen comments, talking about how the Republican Party does need to step up their game. I believe the Democratic Party has an advantage right now, and the Republican Party does need to step up their game, but I don't doubt that there will be a huge influx of same-day election voters on the regular election day. Because when you're talking about a political party that believes, the state should open up, that COVID-19 is not as serious as another political party, which would take it insanely serious, and, Joe Biden is proposing to institute a national mask mandate, there are very clear differences. And if someone doesn't view COVID-19 as a threat, they are more likely to vote in person. That's exactly why the election day turnout in almost every single state favored Donald Trump. At least every single swing state favored Donald Trump. Because generally the people that voted by mail were the people that were more afraid of COVID-19 and in turn more liberal. That's just how America works in our current global pandemic day and age. And looking at the early vote now, I think that the Democratic Party should be okay with these numbers. I think they should be moderately excited, but at the same time should still be apprehensive, because these early voting numbers are never absolute. And once we actually get the finalized 100% done early voting numbers, that's when we can start to draw a very long conclusion about what the Republican Party needs to do on Election Day to do better than they did in 2020. Because it's not just enough to bring this down to a point where black voters go from 32% to 28%. They will need to do more than that. But also, based off the New York Times results, where they give us the presidential race, the Senate runoff, the Senate special election race, the Republican Party did do better in a number of these states. In a number of these races. They did better than Donald Trump. David Perdue did better than Donald Trump, received 0.4% more. The Republicans, and across all of the Republicans in the Senate special election, did better than Donald Trump. Had Donald Trump won David Perdue's numbers, he would have won the state of Georgia, but he didn't. Joe Biden won the state of Georgia. Why? Because Donald Trump was not necessarily this popular figure as he was in a number of other Republican states. Donald Trump may have held on to his margins in Ohio and Iowa, but he wasn't able to do so in Georgia because the suburban, at least the Atlanta metro area, really turned away from Donald Trump and turned out at extremely high rates. And what are we seeing right now? The same exact thing happening. But except this time, it seems to be even more in favor of the Democratic Party. But this was also a time period where that has been completely moved because of the holiday season. You can't imagine too many people would be, the first thing on their minds on Christmas Day is, when are they going to vote? And obviously, there is a very important election. It will determine control of the United States Senate. But also, traditionally, people aren't always talking about politics unless they are heavily invested in it. So, obviously, the 2020 election was definitely more well known, but with all of the money spent in Georgia, I can't imagine too many voters are actually absent about the election. Just a lot of them choose to tune it out or are done with politics. And that's exactly why the Democratic Party should still be apprehensive, because they drove up turnout in key states where turnout is traditionally low. That's why the Democratic Party won this state for the first time in 28 years. They tapped into a group of voters that were very solid for the Democratic Party, but just didn't vote at high rates. And they turned them out in 2020. They will need to turn them out in this election. It seems so far that the numbers will benefit the Democratic Party. But if that election day turnout is able to, turn out at a similar rate as they did in the 2020 election, the Democratic Party will still be in for a run for their money. Over $100 million spent on both sides, and it could still go either way. And looking at those early voting numbers, I'm going to arrive at the conclusion, as I've said probably 6-7 times in this video, yes, the Democratic Party is ahead, but there are still a lot of things that can happen. because the Republican Party is likely to come out in full force on Election Day, which could completely overturn any gains made by the Democratic Party in this early vote. So it really all depends on that. But once we actually get the finalized early vote numbers on January 1st, we can start getting into that discussion about what the Republican Party needs to do, / what we should expect from them or not expect from them, and what potential scenarios could play out on January 1st once we get all of those results. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.